The wind came first. It always did out here, where the land stretched so wide and empty that sound itself seemed to vanish into the horizon. The kind of wind that didn't just blow. It carved. It stripped paint from wood, hope from men, and memory from stone. Lena Cross felt it bite through her coat as she reined her horse to a stop at the crest of the ridge. Below her, the Mercer Ranch sprawled across the valley like a dying animal. Skeletal fences, listing barns, buildings that looked one hard storm away from collapse. She'd been riding for 3 days straight. Her hands were raw from the rains, her legs ached, her lips were cracked and bleeding from the cold. But she didn't care. She'd come too far to turn back now. Somewhere down there was Cole Mercer, the man who'd saved her life 2 years ago and disappeared without a word. The man she owed everything to. The man who, if the rumors were true, was now drowning in a hell of his own making. Lena urged her mare forward, descending the rocky slope toward the ranch. As she drew closer, the full scope of the devastation became clear. Broken wagon wheels lay abandoned in the dirt. A water trough had cracked straight down the middle, its contents long since evaporated. The main house sagged under the weight of years and neglect, its windows dark and lifeless. But it was the silence that hit her hardest. No cattle lowing, no dogs barking, no voices carrying on the wind. Just quiet, like the ranch itself had given up. She was 50 yards from the main gate when a voice cut through the stillness. "That's far enough." Lena's hand instinctively moved toward the rifle strapped to her saddle, but she stopped herself. Slowly, she raised both hands where they could be seen. "I'm not looking for trouble," she called out. A figure emerged from behind the barn, a tall, wiry man with a sun-scorched face and eyes like chipped flint. He carried a Winchester rifle loosely in one hand, but his finger rested near the trigger. 2 more men appeared behind him, flanking him like wolves. "Then you're in the wrong place," the man said. His voice was flat, drained of anything resembling warmth. "We don't get visitors, and we sure as hell don't want any." Lena kept her hands up, but didn't back down. "I'm looking for Cole Mercer." The man's jaw tightened. "What for?" "That's between me and him. Cole don't talk to nobody. He'll talk to me." The man barked out a harsh laugh. "Lady, you got about 10 seconds to turn that horse around before I make you." Lena met his gaze without flinching. "My name is Lena Cross. 2 years ago, Cole Mercer pulled me out of a snowstorm when I was half dead and bleeding. He rode me 20 miles through a blizzard to the nearest town, left me with a doctor, and disappeared before I could even say thank you. I've been looking for him ever since." The man's expression didn't soften, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or disbelief. "That's supposed to mean something to me?" "It means I owe him," Lena said simply. "And I don't leave debts unpaid." For a long moment, no one moved. Then a door creaked open. Lena's gaze snapped toward the main house. A figure stood in the doorway, broad-shouldered, shadow-draped, impossibly still. Even from this distance, she recognized him. Cole Mercer. He looked different than she remembered. Thinner, harder. Like the man she'd met 2 years ago had been hollowed out and replaced with something sharp and brittle. He stepped off the porch and walked toward her with slow, deliberate strides. The other men parted to let him through, and Lena could see it now, the way they deferred to him, the way they watched him like he was something volatile. When he was close enough for her to see his face clearly, Lena's breath caught. He looked like hell. His eyes were bloodshot and rimmed with exhaustion. A scar she didn't remember ran down the side of his jaw. His clothes hung loose on a frame that had clearly lost weight it couldn't afford to lose. But it was the emptiness in his expression that stopped her cold. He looked at her like she was nothing. "You shouldn't have come," Cole said quietly. Lena lowered her hands. "I had to." "Why?" "Because I owe you my life." Cole's mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile, if smiles could carry that much bitterness. "Then we're even. I don't save people anymore." "I'm not asking you to save me," Lena said. "I'm asking you to let me repay you." "With what?" "A meal." The silence that followed was so thick, it felt like a physical thing. One of the men behind Cole, a stocky guy with a scar splitting his eyebrow, let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. "A meal? Lady, we got bigger problems than—" "Shut up, Wade," Cole said without looking at him. Wade's mouth snapped shut, but his eyes burned with resentment. Cole studied Lena for a long moment, his gaze raking over her like he was trying to decide if she was real or some kind of fever dream. "One meal," he finally said. "One meal," Lena confirmed. "You got 3 hours. After that, you ride out and you don't come back." "Deal." Cole turned and walked back toward the house without another word. Wade and the others lingered, watching Lena with a mixture of suspicion and hostility. Lena ignored them. She dismounted, tied her horse to the nearest post, and pulled her saddlebags free. Inside were the only things she'd brought: a cast-iron skillet, a sharp knife, a few bundles of dried herbs, and a small pouch of salt. Wade stepped into her path as she headed toward the house. "You really think one meal's gonna fix this place?" he sneered. Lena met his eyes without hesitation. "No, but it's a start." She stepped around him and kept walking. The kitchen was a disaster. Lena stood in the doorway and took it all in: the shattered dishes piled in the sink, the grease-streaked stovetop, the smell of rot and mildew that clung to everything. Flour had spilled across the counter and hardened into a crust. A pot sat abandoned on the stove, its contents long since congealed into something unrecognizable. This wasn't just neglect. This was surrender. Lena set her bags down and rolled up her sleeves. She started with the stove, scraped away the grease, scrubbed the burners until they gleamed, cleared the counter, swept the floor, and cracked open the windows to let fresh air chase out the stench of decay. Then she went hunting. The pantry was nearly bare: just a few sacks of flour, some dried beans, a jar of lard, and a lone onion that had started to sprout. The root cellar was worse. Most of the shelves were empty. What little remained was either spoiled or close to it. But Lena didn't panic. She'd cooked with less. She hauled everything she could salvage back to the kitchen and spread it out on the counter: flour, beans, lard, onion, a handful of withered potatoes, a strip of salt pork so old it had turned almost black. Not much, but enough. Lena built a fire in the stove and set a pot of water to boil. While it heated, she diced the onion and the potatoes, rendered the fat from the salt pork, and set the beans to soak. The smell of frying onions began to fill the kitchen, sharp and savory and alive. She worked quickly, methodically, her hands moving with the kind of practiced efficiency that came from years of making something out of nothing. An hour passed. Then 2. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Lena glanced up to see one of the ranch hands, a younger man with a patchy beard and wary eyes, standing in the doorway. "You really cooking?" he asked. "Yeah." "Smells good." "It will be." He hesitated, then stepped inside. "Name's Eli." "Lena." Eli watched her work for a moment, then cleared his throat. "You know Cole's not going to let you stay, right? No matter how good this meal is." "I know." "Then why bother?" Lena didn't look up from the pot she was stirring. "Because I owe him, and because he needs this whether he knows it or not." Eli didn't respond to that. He just stood there, watching her in silence until the smell of food became too much, and he slipped back out into the hallway. By the time the 3 hours were up, Lena had transformed the scraps into something that looked almost like a miracle: a pot of thick bean stew, rich with rendered pork fat and caramelized onions, pan-fried potatoes, crisp and golden, biscuits made from the last of the flour, brushed with lard and baked until they were flaky and light. It wasn't much, but it was real. Lena set the table and stepped back. Then she waited. They came in slowly, one by one, drawn by the smell. Wade was the first to arrive, his expression dark and suspicious. Eli followed, then 2 more men Lena hadn't met yet. They stood in the doorway, staring at the table like it was some kind of trap. "Sit," Lena said. No one moved. Then Cole appeared. He looked at the table, then at Lena, and something unreadable flickered across his face. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly. "I know." Cole pulled out a chair and sat. The others followed his lead, still watching Lena like she might vanish if they blinked. Lena served them in silence, ladling stew into bowls, setting biscuits on plates, pouring water from a cracked pitcher. No one spoke. And then Wade picked up his spoon and took a bite. His eyes widened. He took another bite, then another. Then he grabbed a biscuit and tore into it like a man starving. The others followed suit. Within minutes, the table erupted into sound. The scrape of spoons against bowls, the rustle of hands reaching for more, the low murmur of voices that had been silent for too long. Someone laughed. It was a rough, rusty sound, like something that hadn't been used in years. But it was real. Lena stood in the corner watching and felt something crack open inside her chest. This was why she'd come. Cole ate in silence, his gaze fixed on his bowl, but when he finally looked up, his eyes met Lena's, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she saw something other than emptiness. She saw recognition. She saw gratitude. She saw pain. And then he looked away. When the meal was over, the men lingered at the table, reluctant to leave. Eli leaned back in his chair and let out a long, satisfied sigh. "Ma'am," he said, "that was the best damn meal I've had in 2 years." Wade grunted, but didn't disagree. Lena started clearing the dishes. "Glad you liked it." Cole stood and walked over to the window, staring out at the darkening sky. 3 hours are up." Lena paused, a plate in her hands. "I know." "Then you should go." She set the plate down carefully. "What if I don't want to?" Cole turned to face her, and the emptiness was back in his eyes. "This isn't your fight." "Maybe not," Lena said. "But it could be." "Why?" "Because you saved my life, and because this place is dying, and I think you know it." Wade shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Who the hell do you think you are, coming in here and—" "Wade," Cole said sharply. "Sit down." Wade's jaw clenched, but he obeyed. Cole crossed the room until he was standing directly in front of Lena. "You don't know what you're asking." "Then tell me." For a long moment, Cole said nothing. Then, slowly, he spoke. "This ranch is broke. We're 3 months behind on every bill. The land's failing. Half the cattle are dead or dying. The men are barely holding on. And He stopped, his voice breaking. "I can't fix it. I've tried. I can't." Lena didn't flinch. "Then let me help." "One meal isn't going to save this place." "No," Lena agreed, "but it's a start." Cole stared at her, and for a moment she thought he might actually say yes. Then Wade stood again. "This is insane," he said. "She shows up out of nowhere, cooks one meal, and now we're supposed to trust her? She's probably a con artist, or worse." "Wade," Eli said quietly, "shut up." "No," Wade snapped. "Somebody's got to say it. This place is finished. We all know it. And bringing some stranger in here isn't going to change that." Lena turned to face him. "You're right." Wade blinked. "What?" "You're right," Lena repeated. "This place is dying, and one meal won't save it, but giving up sure as hell won't either." Wade opened his mouth to argue, but Lena cut him off. "I don't know you. I don't know this ranch, but I know what it's like to have nothing left, and I know what it's like to fight anyway. So if you want to sit here and wait for everything to collapse, fine, but don't you dare tell me it's impossible." The kitchen fell silent. Cole's gaze hadn't left Lena's face. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough. "You can stay," he said. "1 week. That's it." Lena nodded. 1 week. Wade slammed his hand on the table and stormed out of the room. The others exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing. Cole turned back to the window. "You'll sleep in the spare room off the kitchen. Stay out of the men's way, and don't go poking around where you're not wanted." "Understood." "And Lena?" "Yeah?" "Don't get your hopes up. This place is past saving." Lena didn't respond. She just started washing the dishes. That night, Lena lay awake in the small, cramped room off the kitchen and listened to the wind howl outside. The mattress was thin and lumpy. The blanket smelled like dust. But she didn't care. She was here, and that was enough. For now. She thought about Cole's face when he'd looked at the table, the way his eyes had softened for just a moment before the walls came back up. She thought about the way the men had eaten, like they'd forgotten what it felt like to be cared for. And she thought about the fight ahead. Because Wade was right about one thing. This place was dying. But Lena had spent the last 2 years running from her own grief, her own ghosts. She'd drifted from town to town, job to job, never staying long enough to put down roots. She was tired of running. Maybe that's why she'd really come. Not just to repay a debt, but to find something worth fighting for. The next morning, Lena woke before dawn. She dressed quickly and stepped into the kitchen, where she found Cole already awake, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee. He looked up when she entered. "You're up early?" "Habit?" He nodded and gestured toward the stove. "Coffee's still hot." Lena poured herself a cup and sat down across from him. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Cole broke the silence. "You really mean to stay the week?" "Yeah." "Why?" Lena took a sip of coffee, letting the bitter heat settle in her chest. "Because I made you a promise. And because I think you need help whether you admit it or not." Cole's jaw tightened. "I don't need pity." "Good. Because I'm not offering it." He studied her for a long moment, then looked away. "This place is harder than you think." "I've dealt with hard before." "Not like this." Lena set her cup down. "Try me." Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he stood and walked to the window, staring out at the ranch as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon. "The men don't trust outsiders," he said, "especially Wade. He's been here longer than anyone. He knew my father. He thinks he knows how things should be run." "And you?" "I don't know anything anymore." Lena stood and joined him at the window. "Then maybe it's time to figure it out." Cole didn't respond, but he didn't walk away either. By mid-morning, Lena had assessed the situation. The pantry was nearly empty. The root cellar was worse. The men were surviving on scraps, stale bread, watered-down coffee, whatever they could scavenge. It wasn't sustainable. Lena found Cole in the barn repairing a broken harness. "We need supplies," she said. Cole didn't look up. "We don't have money." "Then we need to find some." "How?" Lena crossed her arms. "You tell me. What does this ranch have that's worth selling?" Cole's hand stilled. "Nothing." "There has to be something." He finally looked at her, and the frustration in his eyes was sharp enough to cut. "We've sold everything we can. The cattle are too weak to bring to market. The horses are half lame. The land's too dry to grow anything. There's nothing left." Lena didn't back down. "Then we make something." "Out of what?" "Out of whatever we've got." Cole stood, tossing the harness aside. "You don't get it. This place is done. Finished. The only reason I'm still here is because I don't have anywhere else to go." "Then stop waiting for it to die," Lena said quietly, "and start fighting." Cole stared at her, his chest rising and falling with barely controlled anger. Then he turned and walked out of the barn. Lena spent the rest of the day taking inventory. She went through every building, every shed, every forgotten corner of the ranch. Most of what she found was junk, broken tools, rotting wood, rusted metal. But buried beneath the debris, she found a few things worth keeping. A crate of preserved vegetables, forgotten in the back of the cellar. A sack of dried corn, hidden behind a pile of old saddles. A barrel of salted meat, still good despite the dust. It wasn't much, but it was more than they'd had that morning. By the time the sun set, Lena had organized everything she'd found and started planning meals for the next few days. She was stirring a pot of corn soup when Wade walked in. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her with barely concealed contempt. "You think you're real clever, don't you?" he said. Lena didn't look up. "No." "Then what are you doing here?" "Cooking." "Why?" "Because people need to eat." Wade pushed off the doorframe and stepped closer. "Let me tell you something, lady. I've been on this ranch for 15 years. I've seen it thrive. I've seen it fall apart. And I've seen people like you come and go, thinking they can fix everything with a smile and a hot meal." Lena finally looked at him. "I'm not trying to fix everything. I'm just trying to help." "We don't need your help." "Cole seems to think you do." Wade's expression darkened. "Cole doesn't know what he's doing. He's been lost ever since—" He stopped himself, jaw clenching. "Ever since what?" Lena asked quietly. Wade didn't answer. He just turned and walked out. That night, the men gathered around the table again. The meal was simpler this time. Corn soup, bread, a few slices of the salted meat Lena had found. But it was warm, and it was enough. Eli was the first to speak. "Ma'am, I don't know how you're doing this, but Thank you, Lena smiled faintly. You're welcome. One of the other men, a quiet, older guy named Roy, nodded in agreement. Ain't had food like this in a long time. Wade sat at the far end of the table, eating in stony silence. Cole didn't eat at all. He just sat there, staring at his bowl, lost in thought. When the meal was over and the men had drifted away, Lena started cleaning up. Cole finally spoke. You found all that in the cellar? Yeah. I didn't know it was there. Most people don't look. Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he stood and walked over to the sink, picking up a dish towel. You don't have to help, Lena said. I know. They worked in silence, washing and drying, until the kitchen was clean. Then Cole set the towel down and looked at her. My wife used to cook like this, he said quietly. Lena's hands stilled. She died 2 years ago, Cole continued. Same winter I found you. She got sick. We couldn't get her to a doctor in time. His voice cracked. She died in that room. He nodded toward the bedroom off the kitchen. Lena's chest tightened. I'm sorry. Cole shook his head. After she was gone, the ranch started falling apart. I tried to keep it together, but I couldn't. And now, he trailed off, his gaze distant. Lena didn't know what to say, so she just stood there, letting the silence hold them both. The week passed faster than Lena expected. She cooked, she cleaned, she organized what little resources the ranch had left. The men started to warm to her, Eli especially. Even Roy, who barely spoke to anyone, began offering her small nods of acknowledgement. Wade remained hostile, but Lena ignored him. She had bigger problems, like the fact that the food was running out again, and the fact that Cole still looked like a man on the edge of collapse. On the 6th day, Lena found him in the barn again, staring at a pile of broken equipment. We're almost out of supplies, she said. Cole didn't respond. Cole? I heard you. So what are we going to do? He turned to face her, and the exhaustion in his eyes was staggering. I don't know. Lena stepped closer. Then let me help you figure it out. Why do you care so much? Because you saved my life, Lena said simply. And because I'm tired of running. Cole stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. All right, he said, let's talk. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table as darkness settled over the ranch. Cole had spread out a collection of papers, ledgers, bills, notices from the bank, each one a testament to how far things had fallen. Lena picked up the top document. It was a notice of delinquency, stamped in red ink, 3 months overdue. How much do you owe? She asked. Cole rubbed his face with both hands. More than I can pay. The bank's been patient, but that patience is running out. They want $5,000 by the end of next month, or they foreclose. 5,000, Lena repeated, setting the paper down. And you have? Maybe 200, if I'm lucky. The numbers were staggering. Lena had known the ranch was in trouble, but this was beyond anything she'd imagined. What about the cattle? She asked. You said they're too weak to sell, but they're half-starved, Cole interrupted. We lost most of the herd during a bad winter 3 years ago. What's left isn't worth the cost of driving them to market. Then we fatten them up. Cole laughed, but there was no humor in it. With what? We barely have enough feed to keep them alive. Lena tapped her fingers on the table, thinking. What about the land? Can you lease it out? The land's dried up. No one wants it. What about selling part of it? Cole's expression darkened. This ranch has been in my family for 3 generations. I'm not selling it piece by piece. Then what are you going to do? I don't know, Cole said, his voice rising. If I knew, don't you think I would have done it already? The frustration in his voice was raw, desperate. Lena could see it eating him alive, the weight of failure, the crushing responsibility of trying to save something that seemed determined to die. She softened her tone. I'm not trying to attack you. I'm trying to help. Cole looked away. I know. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Lena spoke again. What did this place look like when it was thriving? Cole's jaw tightened. Why does that matter? Because maybe if we understand what it was, we can figure out how to make it that again. For a long time, Cole didn't answer. Then slowly he began to speak. When my father ran this place, we had 200 head of cattle. The land was green. We had contracts with 3 different buyers in town. The men were paid on time. We had enough to live on, enough to save, enough to grow. His voice grew quieter. My wife used to say this ranch was alive, that you could feel it breathing. What changed? Drought, disease, bad luck. Cole's hands clenched into fists. And then she died, and I stopped caring. Lena reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Then start caring again. Cole pulled his hand away, but not harshly. It's not that simple. I know it's not, Lena said, but you're still here. That means something. Cole stood abruptly and walked to the window. Outside, the wind howled through the empty fields, rattling the loose boards of the barn. The men are losing faith, he said quietly. Wade's been talking about leaving. Eli's too loyal to go, but I can see it in his eyes. He knows this place is finished, and I can't blame them. I've given them nothing to believe in. Lena stood and joined him at the window. Then give them something. Like what? A plan, a fight, a reason to stay. Cole turned to look at her, and for the first time she saw something other than defeat in his eyes. It was faint, barely there, but it looked like hope. You really think we can turn this around? He asked. I don't know, Lena admitted, but I think we have to try. Cole was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right, he said. Let's try. The next morning, Lena gathered the men in the barn. Wade stood at the back, arms crossed, his expression skeptical. Eli leaned against a post, watching her with cautious curiosity. Roy and the other 2 hands, a younger man named Jack and an older fellow called Silas, stood in a loose cluster near the door. Cole stood beside Lena, silent but present. I know things have been hard, Lena began. I know you're tired. I know you're barely getting by. But I also know this ranch isn't dead yet. Wade snorted. Could have fooled me. Lena ignored him. We've got 3 weeks until the bank demands payment. That's not much time, but it's enough to make a difference if we're smart. And how exactly are we supposed to do that? Wade challenged. By working together, Lena said. By pooling every resource we have and finding a way to make this place profitable again. You make it sound easy, Wade said. It's not easy. But it's possible. Eli spoke up. What's the plan? Lana glanced at Cole, who nodded for her to continue. We start by fixing what's broken, she said. The fences, the barn, the equipment. Then we focus on the cattle. We find a way to get them healthy enough to sell. And we cut costs wherever we can. That still doesn't solve the money problem, Wade said. No, Lena agreed. But it buys us time. And time is what we need. Jack, the younger hand, cleared his throat. What if it doesn't work? Lena met his gaze. Then at least we'll know we tried. No one spoke for a moment. Then Silas, who rarely said anything, stepped forward. I'm in, he said quietly. Eli nodded. Me too. Jack hesitated, then raised his hand. Yeah, all right. Roy shrugged. Ain't got anywhere else to be. All eyes turned to Wade. He stared at Lena, his jaw tight, his eyes hard. Then he shook his head and walked out of the barn without a word. Lena's chest tightened, but she didn't let it show. Then let's get to work, she said. The first task was repairing the fences. Most of the posts had rotted through, and the wire was so rusted it crumbled at the slightest touch. It was back-breaking work, digging new post holes, hauling timber, stringing wire in the biting wind. But the men threw themselves into it. Eli worked alongside Lena, his hands raw and blistered but steady. Jack hauled supplies without complaint. Even Roy, who was well past his prime, did his part. Cole worked harder than anyone. He moved through the ranch like a man possessed, repairing, rebuilding, pushing himself to the point of exhaustion. Lena could see it taking a toll on him, the way his shoulders sagged at the end of each day, the way his hands shook when he thought no one was looking. But he didn't stop. By the end of the first week, half the fences were repaired. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Wade watched from a distance. He didn't help. He didn't hinder. He just watched. One evening, Lena found him sitting on the porch, smoking a hand-rolled cigarette. "You gonna keep sitting there, or are you gonna help?" she asked. Wade took a long drag and blew the smoke into the wind. "I'm not interested in wasting my time." "Then why are you still here?" Wade looked at her, his eyes unreadable. "Because I made a promise to Cole's father. Said I'd look after this place, even if it kills me." Lena sat down beside him. "Then help us save it." Wade laughed bitterly. "You don't get it, do you? This place is cursed, always has been. Cole's father ran himself into the ground trying to keep it alive. Cole's doing the same thing, and now you show up, thinking you can fix it with grit and optimism." "I don't think I can fix it," Lena said, "but I think we can." Wade shook his head. "You're a fool." "Maybe," Lena said, "but at least I'm trying." Wade didn't respond. He just took another drag and stared out at the darkening horizon. The second week brought new challenges. The cattle were worse than Cole had let on. Several were sick, their ribs visible through their hides, their eyes dull and lifeless. Lena had no experience with livestock, but she learned fast how to check for disease, how to administer medicine, how to coax the weakest ones to eat. It was slow, grueling work. But gradually, some of them began to recover. Eli was the first to notice. "That one there," he said, pointing to a cow that had been near death a week ago. "She's putting on weight." Lena allowed herself a small smile. "Good. You got a knack for this," Eli said. "I just pay attention." Eli grinned. "Most folks don't." As they worked, Eli began to open up. He told Lena about his life before the ranch, how he had drifted from job to job, never finding a place that felt like home, how Cole had taken him in when no one else would. "Cole's a good man," Eli said. "He don't always show it, but he is. This ranch, it's all he's got left. Losing it would kill him." Lena nodded. "Then we won't let that happen." But the progress came at a cost. Supplies were dwindling again. The food Lena had found in the cellar was nearly gone. The men were eating smaller portions, stretching every meal as far as it would go. Lena tried not to let it show, but she could feel the pressure building. One night, as she was preparing a meager dinner of beans and flatbread, Cole walked into the kitchen. "We're almost out of flour," Lena said without looking up. "I know." "And the beans won't last another week." "I know." Lena set down the spoon and turned to face him. "Cole, we can't keep going like this." "I know," he said again, his voice tight. "Then what are we going to do?" Cole leaned against the counter, his shoulders slumping. "I don't know." Lena crossed the room and stood in front of him. "Yes, you do." Cole looked up, confused. "What?" "You know what needs to be done. You just don't want to do it." Cole's jaw tightened. "If you're talking about selling the land, I'm talking about asking for help." Cole's expression hardened. "No." "Why not?" "Because I've already asked everyone I can. No one's willing to lend money to a failing ranch." "Then we find another way." "There is no other way," Cole snapped. "Don't you get it? We're out of options." Lena didn't back down. "We're not out of options until we're dead. And last I checked, we're both still breathing." Cole stared at her, his chest rising and falling with barely controlled frustration. Then he turned and walked out. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She lay in the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. The ranch was slipping through their fingers. No matter how hard they worked, no matter how much they stretched their resources, it wasn't enough. They needed money, and they needed it fast. An idea began to form in her mind, wild, desperate, maybe impossible, but it was something. The next morning, she found Cole in the barn. "I have an idea," she said. Cole looked up from the saddle he was mending. "I'm listening." "What if we host a cattle auction here?" Cole frowned. "The cattle aren't ready." "Not now," Lena said, "but in 2 weeks they could be. We get them as healthy as possible, spread the word, and invite buyers from the surrounding towns. No one's going to come all the way out here for a handful of half-starved cattle. They will if we make it worth their while." Cole set down the saddle. "How?" "We offer more than just cattle. We offer a meal, or a social event. Something people will want to attend." Cole shook his head. "We don't have the resources for that." "We will if we get creative." Cole studied her for a long moment. Then he sighed. You really think this could work? I think it's our best shot. Cole looked away, his jaw working. Then he nodded. All right, he said. Let's do it. Good. The preparations began immediately. Lena threw herself into planning, calculating how much food they'd need, how to stretch their supplies, how to make the event attractive enough to draw buyers. Eli and Jack helped spread the word, writing to neighboring towns and posting notices. Roy and Silas worked on getting the cattle into the best shape possible. Even Wade, though still distant, began to pitch in. He didn't say much, but Lena noticed him working late into the night, repairing the auction pen and organizing the livestock. Cole worked alongside them, his energy renewed by the prospect of a plan, any plan, that might save the ranch. But as the days passed, the pressure mounted. The food ran out faster than Lena had anticipated. She found herself improvising meals from scraps, stretching a single chicken into soup for 6 men, baking bread from the last dregs of flour. The men never complained, but Lena could see the exhaustion in their faces, the way their clothes hung looser, the way their movements grew slower. One evening, as she was preparing yet another sparse meal, Eli walked into the kitchen. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "you're running yourself into the ground." Lena didn't stop stirring the pot. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." Lena set down the spoon and turned to face him. "What do you want me to do, Eli? Give up?" "I want you to take care of yourself." Lena laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'll take care of myself when this is over." Eli shook his head. "You sound just like Cole." Lena didn't respond to that. She just went back to cooking. 3 days before the auction, disaster struck. Lena woke to the sound of shouting. She bolted out of bed and ran outside to find the men gathered near the barn. Smoke was rising from the far end of the structure, thick and black. "Fire!" Jack yelled. Lena's heart stopped. She ran toward the barn, but Cole grabbed her arm. "Stay back," he ordered. "What happened?" "Lantern fell," Eli said, his face streaked with soot. "We got it out, but the hay's ruined." Lena's stomach dropped. The hay was their feed supply, the only thing keeping the cattle alive long enough to auction. "How much did we lose?" she asked. Cole's expression was grim. "About half." "Half." Lena felt the ground shift beneath her. "We can make it work," she said, though she didn't believe it. "No, we can't," Wade said, stepping forward. "We don't have enough feed to last until the auction. The cattle are going to starve." "Then we find more," Lena said. "Where?" Wade demanded. "We've already bought everything we can afford. There's nothing left." Lena looked at Cole, desperation clawing at her chest. "There has to be something." Cole didn't answer. He just stared at the smoldering barn, his face ashen. That night, Lena sat alone in the kitchen, her head in her hands. Everything they'd worked for, every sacrifice, every sleepless night was crumbling. The door creaked open and Cole walked in. He sat down across from her without a word. For a long time, they just sat there in silence. Then Cole spoke. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Lena looked up. "For what?" "For dragging you into this. For letting you believe we could save this place." "You didn't drag me into anything," Lena said. "I chose to stay." "Why?" Lena hesitated, then she told him the truth. "Because 2 years ago I was ready to die. I'd lost everything, my family, my home, my reason to keep going. And then you showed up. You didn't know me. You didn't owe me anything. But you saved me anyway." Her voice broke. "I came here to repay a debt. But somewhere along the way, this became about more than that. This became about proving that I'm not just a survivor, that I can fight for something, that I can build something." Cole's eyes glistened. "You've already done more than I ever could have asked." "It's not enough." "It is," Cole said firmly. "Lena, you gave these men hope when they had none. You gave me a reason to keep going. That's worth more than any ranch." Lena shook her head. "I didn't come this far to quit now." Cole reached across the table and took her hand. "Then we fight," he said. "Whatever it takes." Lena squeezed his hand. "Whatever it takes," she echoed. The next morning, Lena rallied the men. We've got 2 days until the auction, she said. The hay's gone, but we're not. We're going to make this work. How? Wade asked. We ration what feed we have left. We focus on the strongest cattle, and we make sure every single one of them looks as good as possible when the buyers arrive. And the meal? Eli asked. Lena smiled faintly. Leave that to me. For the next 2 days, the ranch became a whirlwind of activity. The men worked tirelessly, grooming the cattle, cleaning the pens, making sure everything looked presentable. Lena scoured the pantry, the cellar, the surrounding land for anything edible. She hunted wild game, foraged for greens, bartered with a neighboring homesteader for eggs. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. The night before the auction, Lena stood in the kitchen and surveyed her supplies. A handful of rabbits, a basket of eggs, some wild herbs, a sack of cornmeal. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then she got to work. By the time dawn broke over the ranch, Lena had been cooking for 6 hours straight. Her hands were blistered from the heat of the stove. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep. But the kitchen smelled like heaven. Roasted rabbit seasoned with wild herbs, cornbread baked until golden, eggs scrambled with foraged greens, and a soup made from bones she'd simmered overnight until they surrendered every drop of flavor. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't fancy, but it was real food, made with care, and that would have to be enough. Cole appeared in the doorway just as she was pulling the last batch of cornbread from the oven. "You've been up all night," he said. "So have you," Lena replied, not looking up. Cole stepped into the kitchen, and she could see the exhaustion carved into every line of his face. But there was something else there too, a flicker of determination that hadn't been present before. "The cattle are ready," he said. "Eli's got them in the pen. They look better than I expected." "Good. Lena." Cole waited until she met his eyes. "Whatever happens today, I want you to know—" "Don't," Lena interrupted. "We're going to make this work." Cole held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, we are." The first wagons arrived just after 9 in the morning. Lena watched from the kitchen window as buyers trickled onto the property. Ranchers from neighboring counties, merchants from town, a few speculators hoping to find a bargain. Not as many as she'd hoped for, but more than she'd feared. Wade stood near the auction pen, directing people where to go. Eli and Jack were handling the cattle, showing them off to interested buyers. Roy had positioned himself near the main gate, greeting arrivals with a gruff nod. Cole was everywhere at once, shaking hands, answering questions, doing his best to project confidence he probably didn't feel. Lena took a deep breath and stepped outside. The moment she emerged from the house carrying the first platter of food, conversation stopped. Heads turned. A few of the buyers exchanged curious glances. She set the platter down on a makeshift table they'd constructed from old boards and sawhorses. Then she went back for more. By the time she'd brought out everything, the table was laden with food, enough to feed the 30 or so people who'd shown up, with a little left over if they were lucky. One of the buyers, a heavy-set man with a thick mustache, approached the table and eyed the spread skeptically. "This all for us, mate?" he asked. "Help yourself," Lena said. He picked up a piece of cornbread, sniffed it, then took a bite. His eyebrows shot up. "Damn," he muttered. "That's good." Word spread quickly. Within minutes, people were crowding around the table, filling plates, talking in low, appreciative murmurs. Lena caught Cole's eye from across the yard. He gave her a small nod. Gratitude mixed with something that looked like awe. She allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction before heading back to the kitchen to keep the coffee hot. The auction itself began at noon. Wade stood on a raised platform near the pen, his voice carrying across the yard as he called out bids. Cole stood beside him, trying to look calm, but Lena could see the tension in his shoulders. The first few cattle went quickly, not for great prices, but decent enough. The buyers were cautious, testing the waters, trying to figure out just how desperate the Mercer Ranch really was. Then one of the larger bulls came up for auction. He was one of the healthiest animals they had, muscular, well-groomed, with a steady gaze that suggested strength. Eli had spent hours working on him, and it showed. The bidding started slow. Then a tall, sharp-eyed man in an expensive coat raised his hand. 200, he called out. Wade's eyes narrowed. 200. Do I hear 250? Silence. The man in the coat smiled faintly, sensing victory. Then another voice cut through the air. 300. Heads turned. A woman stood near the back of the crowd, middle-aged, dressed practically, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent her life working land. The man in the coat frowned. 350. 400, the woman countered without hesitation. The bidding war escalated quickly. Within minutes, the price had climbed to $600, far more than anyone had expected. Finally, the man in the coat shook his head and stepped back. Sold, Wade announced, pointing to the woman. 600 to the lady. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Cole's face remained impassive, but Lena saw the way his hands unclenched slightly. They were going to make it. Maybe. The auction continued through the afternoon. Not every animal sold for top dollar, but enough of them did well that Lena could see Cole's posture gradually shifting from tense to cautiously hopeful. By the time the last cow was sold, the sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Wade tallied the numbers while the buyers settled their accounts. Lena stood near the house, watching as people began to pack up and leave, many of them stopping to thank her for the food. The heavy-set man with the mustache paused on his way out. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat, "best meal I've had in months. You ever think about opening a restaurant? You let me know." Lena smiled. "I'll keep that in mind." When the last wagon had disappeared down the road, Cole, Lana, and the ranch hands gathered near the barn. Wade held the ledger in his hands, his expression unreadable. "Well?" Cole asked. Wade glanced at the numbers one more time, then looked up. $4,200, he said. The silence that followed was deafening. Eli let out a breath. That's more than we hoped for." "It's not enough," Wade said flatly. "We need 5,000. Cole's face fell. "We're still 800 short." "800 we don't have," Wade added. Lena's chest tightened. They'd worked so hard, fought so desperately, and it still wasn't enough. Roy cleared his throat. "What if we sell some of the equipment? The old plow, maybe, or—" "That equipment's worth pennies," Wade interrupted. "It won't make a difference." Jack spoke up hesitantly. "What about the land? Just a small piece." "No," Cole said sharply. "I told you, I'm not selling the land." "Then what are we supposed to do?" Wade demanded. "We're 800 short. The bank's not going to wait." Cole didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at the ground, his jaw working. Lena stepped forward. "We'll figure something out." Wade rounded on her. "You keep saying that, but we're running out of time. And options. And miracles." "Wade," Eli said quietly, "that's enough." "No, it's not," Wade shot back. "I'm done pretending this place has a future. We gave it our best shot. It wasn't enough. It's time to face reality." Cole's head snapped up. "What are you saying?" Wade met his gaze head on. "I'm saying maybe it's time to let go." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Cole's face went pale. "You want me to just give up?" "I want you to stop killing yourself over something that's already dead." "This ranch isn't dead," Cole said, his voice shaking. "Yes, it is," Wade said, "and you know it." Cole took a step toward Wade, his fists clenched. "My father built this place with his bare hands. My wife died here. This ranch is all I have left, and you want me to just walk away?" "Your father's dead," Wade said bluntly. "Your wife's dead, and if you keep going like this, you're going to be dead too." Cole's hand shot out and grabbed Wade by the collar. "Say that again." Wade didn't flinch. "You heard me." For a moment, Lena thought Cole was going to hit him, but then Cole shoved Wade backward and turned away, his chest heaving. "Get out," Cole said quietly. Wade straightened his collar. "Fine. But when this place collapses, don't say I didn't warn you." He walked off into the darkness, leaving the rest of them standing in stunned silence. Eli broke the quiet first. "Cole, he didn't mean—" "Yes, he did," Cole said. "And maybe he's right." "No," Lena said firmly. "He's not." Cole turned to look at her, and the defeat in his eyes was crushing. "We're $800 short, Lena. We've sold everything we can. We've done everything we can. It's over." "It's not over until we say it is." "And what are we supposed to do?" Pull $800 out of thin air? Lena didn't have an answer to that, but she refused to give up. That night, she lay awake in her room, her mind racing through possibilities. They could try to borrow the money, but Cole had already exhausted every contact he had. They could try another auction, but they had no more cattle to sell. They could... A thought struck her. It was risky, maybe even reckless, but it might work. She got out of bed and went to find Cole. He was sitting on the porch, staring out at the dark expanse of the ranch. A half-empty bottle of whiskey sat beside him. "Can't sleep?" he asked without looking at her. "Neither can you, apparently." Cole took a swig from the bottle. "What's the point? In 3 weeks, the bank takes everything anyway." Lena sat down beside him. "I have an idea." Cole laughed bitterly. "Another one?" "Hear me out." He gestured for her to continue. "What if we throw another event? A bigger one. Invite people from farther out, offer food, entertainment, maybe even a dance, charge an entry fee." Cole shook his head. "We don't have the resources for that. We have enough for one more push, one more gamble. And if it doesn't work, then at least we'll know we tried everything." Cole was quiet for a long time. Then he set the bottle down and looked at her. "Why are you still here?" he asked. "You could have left after the auction. You paid your debt. You don't owe me anything." Lena met his gaze. "Maybe I'm not doing this for you anymore." "Then why?" "Because I want to see if we can win." Cole studied her face in the dim light, searching for something. Then he nodded slowly. "All right," he said. "One more gamble." The next morning, Lena gathered the men again, minus Wade, who hadn't been seen since the night before. "We're going to host a harvest social," she announced. 2 weeks from now. We'll invite people from all over the county, charge a small entry fee, 50 cents per person. If we get enough people, we can make up the difference." Eli frowned. 50 cents? That's not much." "It doesn't have to be," Lena said. "If we get 2,000 people, that's $1,000. Jack whistled. 2,000 people? That's half the county." "Then we'd better start spreading the word." Roy scratched his beard. "What about food? Entertainment? We're broke." "We'll make it work," Lena said. "We've done it before." Silas, who rarely spoke, cleared his throat. "What if Wade's right? What if this is just delaying the inevitable?" Lena looked each of them in the eye. "Maybe it is, but I'd rather go down fighting than give up without a fight. So I'm asking you, are you with me?" For a moment, no one moved. Then Eli stepped forward. "I'm in." Jack nodded. "Me too." Roy sighed. "What the hell? I'm in." Silas hesitated, then gave a small nod. "All right." Lena turned to Cole. "What about you?" Cole's jaw tightened. Then he straightened his shoulders and met her gaze. "Let's do it," he said. The preparations for the harvest social consumed every waking moment. Eli and Jack rode out to neighboring towns, posting notices and spreading the word. Roy and Silas worked on clearing a large area near the barn for dancing and socializing. Cole focused on repairing what was left of the ranch's infrastructure, determined to make the place look presentable. And Lena planned the food. She had almost nothing to work with. The auction had depleted their remaining supplies, and there was no money to buy more. But Lena had learned long ago how to make something out of nothing. She spent her days foraging, hunting rabbits, gathering wild vegetables, fishing in the nearby creek. She bartered with neighboring homesteaders, trading labor for eggs, milk, flour. It was exhausting work, made worse by the knowledge that if this didn't work, it was over. One afternoon, as Lena was cleaning a batch of fish by the creek, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find Wade standing there, his hat in his hands. "Didn't think I'd see you again," Lena said, turning back to her work. Wade shifted his weight. "Yeah, well, neither did I. What do you want?" "I came to apologize." Lena paused, her knife hovering over the fish. "For what?" "For what I said to Cole. For giving up." Wade cleared his throat. "I've been on this ranch a long time. I watched it thrive. I watched it fall apart. And I guess I couldn't stand seeing it die slowly. Felt like ripping off a bandage would hurt less." Lena set down the knife and looked at him. "And now?" "Now, I think maybe I was wrong." "About what?" Wade met her eyes. "About you." about this place, about whether there's still something worth fighting for. Lena studied him for a moment. Then she picked up the knife and went back to work. You planning to stand there, or are you going to help? She asked. Wade cracked a small smile. I can help. He knelt down beside her and started cleaning fish. They worked in silence for a while. Then Wade spoke again. You know, when you first showed up, I thought you were going to ruin everything. And now? Now I think you might be the only thing keeping this place alive. Lena didn't respond to that, but she felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. The days blurred together in a haze of preparation. Lena cooked from dawn until midnight, preserving what she could, planning meals that would stretch to feed hundreds. The men built tables, strung lanterns, cleared brush, and transformed the dying ranch into something that almost looked alive again. Cole worked alongside them, and Lena watched as something shifted in him. The emptiness that had haunted his eyes began to fade, replaced by a quiet determination. One evening, as they were hanging the last of the lanterns, Cole turned to her. You know, when you first showed up, I thought you were crazy, he said. Lena smiled faintly. I think I might be. Maybe. But you gave me something I thought I'd lost. What's that? Hope. Lena looked at him, and for a moment the world seemed to still. Then Cole cleared his throat and looked away. Anyway, thank you. Don't thank me yet, Lena said. We still have to pull this off. We will, Cole said. And for the first time, he sounded like he believed it. The night before the harvest social, Lena stood in the kitchen and surveyed her work. She'd prepared enough food to feed 500 people, stews, roasts, bread, pies made from foraged berries. It had taken every ounce of her strength, every trick she'd ever learned. But it was done. Cole walked in just as she was wiping down the counter. You should get some rest, he said. So should you. Cole smiled. Yeah. They stood there for a moment, neither of them moving. Then Cole spoke. Lena, I need to tell you something. What? He hesitated, then shook his head. Never mind. It can wait. Cole, get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow's a big day. He left before she could respond. Lena stared after him, her heart pounding for reasons she couldn't quite name. The morning of the harvest social dawned clear and cold. Lena woke before sunrise and went outside. The ranch was transformed. Lanterns hung from every post, tables lined the yard, and the air smelled like wood smoke and possibility. People began arriving just after noon. At first it was a trickle. A few families from town, some neighboring ranchers, a handful of curious onlookers. But then the trickle became a stream, and then a flood. By mid-afternoon, the ranch was teeming with people. Hundreds of them. Maybe more. Lena stood near the food tables, watching in amazement as the crowd swelled. Eli appeared at her side, grinning. We did it. We're not done yet, Lena said, but she couldn't help smiling. The social was a success in every sense of the word. People ate, danced, laughed. Children ran through the yard. Music filled the air. Someone had brought a fiddle, and soon others joined in with guitars and harmonicas. Cole moved through the crowd, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, looking more alive than Lena had ever seen him. And then, just as the sun began to set, the sky darkened. Lena looked up and felt her stomach drop. Storm clouds were rolling in from the west, thick, black, and moving fast. Within minutes, the wind picked up. The temperature plummeted, and then the first snowflakes began to fall. At first, people laughed it off. A little snow wouldn't hurt anyone. But the snow didn't stop. It came harder, faster, until it was a blinding whiteout. The wind howled through the ranch, tearing down lanterns, scattering tables. Panic rippled through the crowd. Everyone inside, Cole shouted. Get to the house and the barn. People scrambled for shelter. Lena helped usher families into the house, packing them in until there was barely room to move. But not everyone made it inside. Through the swirling snow, Lena saw a figure stumbling near the far edge of the property. Cole, she shouted. Someone's out there. Cole didn't hesitate. He grabbed a rope and ran into the storm. Lena's heart lurched. Cole, wait! But he was already gone, swallowed by the blizzard. Lena stood frozen in the doorway, watching the white wall of snow where Cole had disappeared. The wind screamed across the ranch, tearing at her clothes, her hair, her resolve. "Lena, get inside!" Eli shouted from behind her. She ignored him. Her hand found the door frame, gripping it hard enough that her knuckles went white. Every instinct told her to run after Cole, but she knew that would only make things worse. 2 people lost was worse than 1, but standing there doing nothing felt like dying. The seconds stretched into minutes. The storm intensified, and still there was no sign of Cole or whoever he'd gone after. Inside the house, people huddled together, mothers clutching children, men staring grimly out the windows at the chaos beyond. Lena's mind raced. She calculated distances, wind direction, how long a man could survive in this cold. The numbers weren't good. Then, through the howling wind, she heard something. A shout, faint, barely audible, but there. Lena grabbed a lantern from the hook by the door and stepped out into the storm. The wind hit her like a physical blow, nearly knocking her off her feet. Snow stung her face, blinding her within seconds. "Lena, no!" Eli's voice was lost in the wind. She pushed forward, holding the lantern high, squinting against the brutal onslaught. 10 steps. 20. The house behind her disappeared into the white void. "Cole!" she screamed, but the wind tore the words away. Another shout, closer this time, to her left. Lena turned, stumbling through knee-deep snow, her legs burning with effort. The cold was already seeping through her clothes, turning her fingers numb. Then she saw them. 2 dark shapes struggling through the white. Cole, half carrying, half dragging, an elderly man who looked barely conscious. The rope Cole had grabbed was tied around both their waists. Lena reached them and grabbed Cole's arm. "This way!" she shouted into his ear. Together they hauled the old man back toward the house. It felt like moving through molasses, every step a battle against the wind and snow. Lena's lungs burned, her vision blurred, but she didn't stop. Finally, blessedly, the dark outline of the house emerged from the storm. Hands reached out, Eli, Jack, Wade, pulling them inside. They collapsed on the floor, gasping, shaking, covered in snow. The old man was unconscious. Lena immediately dropped to her knees beside him, checking for breathing, for a pulse. Both were there, but weak. "Get him warm," she ordered. "Blankets, hot water now." The women in the room sprang into action. Within minutes, they had the old man wrapped in every blanket they could find, positioned near the stove, with warm compresses on his hands and feet. Lena turned to Cole, who was still on the floor, his face pale, his lips tinged blue. "You idiot," she said, her voice shaking. "You could have died." Cole looked up at her, and despite everything, he smiled. "But I didn't." "That's not the point." "Isn't it?" Lena wanted to hit him, to scream at him, to tell him that watching him disappear into that storm had felt like her heart being torn out of her chest. Instead, she grabbed more blankets and threw them at him. "Get warm, and don't you ever do that again." Cole caught the blankets, still smiling. "Yes, ma'am." The storm raged through the night. People slept wherever they could find space, on floors and chairs, crowded together for warmth. The house and barn were packed beyond capacity. Lena moved through both buildings, checking on people, distributing what little food remained, trying to keep everyone calm. The old man Cole had saved regained consciousness around midnight. His name was Thomas Wheeler, and he'd gotten separated from his family in the chaos. They'd made it to the barn, frantic with worry, until Lena reunited them. "Mrs." Wheeler grabbed Lena's hands, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. Thank you for saving him." "Thank Cole," Lena said. "He's the one who went out there." But Mrs. Wheeler shook her head. "My husband told me what happened. He said you came into the storm to guide them back. Said he heard your voice when he thought he was dying." Lena didn't know what to say to that. She just squeezed the woman's hands and moved on. By dawn, the storm had finally passed. Lena stepped outside and felt her breath catch. The world had been transformed into something alien and beautiful, everything buried under 3 feet of pristine white snow. The sun was just rising, turning the landscape into a sea of pink and gold. But beauty didn't change reality. The ranch was a disaster. Tables were buried, lanterns were broken and scattered. Half the fences had been blown down. And somewhere under all that snow were the remnants of the harvest social, the food, the decorations, the hope they'd built. Cole emerged from the barn and walked over to stand beside her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Cole said, "We're ruined." Lena looked at him. His face was haggard, his eyes hollow with exhaustion and defeat. "The storm destroyed everything," he continued. "The social barely made anything before people had to evacuate. And now we've got 200 people stranded here with no food and no way to get them home until the road's clear." "How much did we make?" Lena asked. Cole pulled a small pouch from his pocket. $340. We needed 800. The weight of that number settled over them like the snow. "So we're still short," Lena said quietly. "By more than half." Cole's voice was flat, emotionless. "And the bank's deadline is in 10 days. Lena stared out at the snow-covered wasteland of the ranch. Everything they'd worked for, everything they'd sacrificed, had been buried in a single night. Behind them, the door opened. Wade stepped out, followed by Eli, Jack, Roy, and Silas. "Roads won't be clear for at least 3 days, Wade reported. "Maybe longer. And we've got maybe enough food for one more day if we ration hard." "What about the town?" Jack asked. "Can we send someone for supplies?" "Nobody's getting through that," Eli said, gesturing at the massive drifts. "Not on horseback, not on foot. We're completely cut off." Roy cleared his throat. "So what do we do?" Everyone looked at Cole. He stood there, staring at the snow, and Lena could see him breaking. The weight of it all, the debt, the storm, the responsibility for 200 stranded people, was crushing him. "I don't know," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Lena stepped forward. "Then I'll tell you what we do. We survive." Wade shook his head. "With what? We're out of food, out of money, out of options." "No," Lena said firmly. "We're out of easy options. But we're not out of options." "What are you talking about?" Jack asked. Lena turned to face all of them. "We have 200 people here. That means 200 sets of hands. We put them to work." "Doing what?" Wade demanded. "Clearing the snow, repairing the damage, hunting, gathering, rationing what we have. We turn this disaster into an opportunity." "An opportunity for what?" "To show everyone here what this ranch is capable of," Lena said. "To show them that we don't give up when things get hard. To prove that this place is worth saving." Eli was nodding. "She's right. These people are stuck here anyway. Might as well make use of the time." "And if it doesn't work?" Wade asked. Lena met his eyes. "Then at least we'll go down fighting together." For a moment, no one moved. Then Cole straightened his shoulders. "All right," he said. "Let's get to work." They organized the stranded guests into teams. The able-bodied men worked with the ranch hands to dig out the buildings and repair the storm damage. The women and older children helped in the kitchen, stretching what little food remained. The hunters among them went out in small groups, searching for game. At first, people were skeptical, but Lena had a gift for rallying people, for making them believe that their work mattered. She moved from group to group, thanking them, encouraging them, working alongside them until her hands were raw and her back screamed in protest. And slowly, miraculously, the mood began to shift. People started talking, laughing, sharing stories. The work became less of a burden and more of a shared purpose. Strangers became neighbors. The ranch, which had felt so dead and empty for so long, suddenly felt alive. On the second day, one of the hunters brought back a deer. It wasn't much for 200 people, but Lena made it stretch. She used every part, roasted the meat, boiled the bones for broth, even saved the hide for later use. That night, as everyone gathered in the barn for a communal meal, Thomas Wheeler stood up. "I want to say something," he announced, his voice carrying through the crowd. "2 nights ago, I thought I was going to die out in that storm, but Cole Mercer risked his life to save mine. And this woman here," he gestured to Lena, "came out into the blizzard to bring us both home." He paused, looking around at the assembled crowd. "I've lived in this county for 40 years. I've seen ranches come and go, but I've never seen people fight like this. Never seen folks refuse to give up even when everything's against them." Mrs. Wheeler stood up beside her husband. "We came here for a social, but what we've found is something more important. We've found family." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Then a younger man stood. Lena recognized him as one of the buyers from the auction. "I'll be honest, I came here thinking this ranch was finished, but after these last 2 days, seeing what you people are capable of, I've changed my mind." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded bill. "I want to contribute, to help save this place." He walked forward and handed the money to Cole. For a moment, Cole just stared at it. Then another person stood up, offering money, and another, and another. Within minutes, people were streaming forward, pressing bills and coins into Cole's hands. Not everyone had much to give, but they gave what they could. Lena watched with tears streaming down her face as the impossible happened right before her eyes. The community was saving the ranch. When the last person had contributed, Cole stood there with his hands full of money, looking stunned. Wade appeared at his side and quickly counted it. His eyes widened. "Cole," he said quietly, "it's enough." Cole's head snapped up. "What?" "It's enough," Wade repeated, louder this time. "With what we made from the auction and the social and now this, it's enough to pay the bank." The barn erupted in cheers. Cole stood frozen, overwhelmed. Then his eyes found Lena across the crowd. She smiled at him through her tears. He crossed the barn in quick strides and pulled her into a fierce embrace. "We did it," he whispered into her hair. "We actually did it." Lena held him tight, feeling his heart pounding against her chest. "Yeah, we did." The roads cleared on the 4th day. People began to leave, reluctantly, promising to return, to help however they could. The Wheelers were among the last to go. Thomas shook Cole's hand for a long time, unable to find words. "You ever need anything," he finally said. "Anything at all, you send word." "I will," Cole promised. When the last wagon had disappeared over the ridge, Lena found herself standing in the yard with Cole and the ranch hands. The place looked different now. Still damaged, still struggling, but not dying. Not anymore. "So what now?" Eli asked. Cole looked at the money pouch in his hands. "Now we pay the bank, and then we rebuild. Properly this time." "That'll take months," Jack said. "Then we've got our work cut out for us," Cole replied. Wade stepped forward. "I'm in, for as long as it takes." The others nodded in agreement. Cole turned to Lena. "What about you?" Lena had been dreading this question. Her original plan had been to stay 1 week. That week had turned into something much longer, much deeper. But she'd never really decided whether she was staying for good or just until the crisis passed. Now, looking at Cole's face, at the hope in his eyes, she realized there was never really a choice. "I'm staying," she said. Relief flooded Cole's features. "You sure?" "Yeah, I'm sure." That night, Lena lay in her bed and stared at the ceiling. She'd come to this ranch to repay a debt, to prove she could do something meaningful with the second chance Cole had given her 2 years ago. But somewhere along the way, it had become about more than that. It had become about building something, creating something, finding a place where she belonged. She'd stopped running, and it felt right. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Cole stepped inside, looking hesitant. "You got a minute?" "Of course." He sat down in the rickety chair by the window. For a long moment he didn't speak. Then he said, "I need to tell you something. I tried to tell you before the storm, but I chickened out." Lena sat up. "What is it?" Cole took a deep breath. "When my wife died, I thought I died with her. I went through the motions, running the ranch, taking care of the men, but I wasn't really alive. I was just existing." He looked at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her chest ache. "And then you showed up," he continued. "This woman who refused to let me give up, who fought for my ranch harder than I did, who made me remember what it feels like to care about something." Lena's heart was pounding now. "I'm not good with words," Cole said. "And I don't know if this is the right time, or if I'm even doing this right. But I need you to know that you've changed everything for me. You've given me a reason to fight, a reason to hope." He stood up and crossed to where she sat, dropping to one knee beside the bed. "Lena Cross, will you stay with me? Not just for the ranch, but for us?" Lena felt tears spilling down her cheeks. "Cole, I know it's fast. I know we've barely had time to breathe, let alone figure out what this is. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Lena reached out and cupped his face in her hands. Yes. Yes? Yes, I'll stay. Yes to us. Yes to all of it. Cole's face broke into the first genuine, unguarded smile she'd ever seen from him. He stood, pulling her up with him, and kissed her. It was a kiss that tasted like snow and hope and new beginnings. When they finally broke apart, both of them were crying and laughing at the same time. I don't have a ring, Cole said. I don't have much of anything, really. I don't need a ring, Lena said. I just need you. They stood there in the small room, holding each other as the wind whistled softly outside. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like something to build. The next morning, Cole rode into town with the money pouch. Lena wanted to go with him, but he insisted she stay and help coordinate the cleanup efforts. The ranch still needed work, and there was no time to waste. She watched him ride off, her heart in her throat, hoping against hope that the bank would accept the payment and the nightmare would finally be over. Hours passed. Then more hours. By late afternoon, Lena was pacing the yard, unable to focus on anything else. Eli tried to distract her with questions about dinner, but she barely heard him. Then finally, she saw a rider cresting the ridge. Cole. But something was wrong. He was riding too fast, too recklessly. Lena's stomach dropped. She ran to meet him as he thundered into the yard, his horse lathered with sweat. Cole dismounted before the horse had fully stopped, his face ashen. What happened? Lena demanded. Cole pulled an envelope from his coat with shaking hands. The bank accepted the payment. The ranch is safe. Relief flooded through her. Then why do you look like that? Because of this. He handed her the envelope. Lena opened it and pulled out a telegram. As she read, her blood turned to ice. The message was simple, brutal. Cattle drive contracted. Deliver 150 head to Millerton in 14 days. Payment on delivery. Failure to deliver forfeits ranch to creditor. Lena read it twice, trying to make sense of it. What is this? It's a contract my father signed years ago, Cole said, his voice hollow. Apparently the creditor's been waiting for the right time to enforce it. The banker said if we don't deliver the cattle, the creditor can seize the ranch regardless of whether we've paid the bank. But we don't have 150 cattle, Lena said. I know. And even if we did, Millerton is over 200 miles away, through mountains, in winter. I know. Lena's mind raced. Who's the creditor? Cole's jaw clenched. Russell Kincaid. The name hit Lena like a punch. Everyone in the territory knew Russell Kincaid. He was a land baron, ruthless and powerful, who'd built his empire by destroying smaller ranches and absorbing their land. This was a trap, Lena said. He waited until we paid the bank, then sprung this on you. He knew we couldn't possibly deliver. Which means he gets the ranch without a fight, Cole finished. And there's nothing we can do about it. The contract is legal. My father's signature is on it. Lena crumpled the telegram in her fist. Then we deliver the cattle. Cole stared at her. Lena, we have maybe 40 head that are healthy enough to drive. We'd need to buy or borrow the rest, and we just spent every penny we had. Then we find another way. There is no other way, Cole said, his voice breaking. We're finished. Kincaid wins. No. Lena's voice was steel. We didn't fight this hard just to hand everything over to some greedy land grabber. There has to be a way. Wade, who'd been listening, spoke up. Even if we could get the cattle, a winter drive to Millerton is suicide. The mountain passes will be snowed in. We'd lose half the herd, maybe more. So we take a different route, Lena said. There is no different route, Wade said. Not one that gets us there in 14 days. Lena turned to Cole. What about the southern pass? Every man in the yard went silent. Cole's face went pale. No, absolutely not. Why not? Lena asked. Because it's too dangerous, Cole said. My father lost half his men trying to drive cattle through that pass. I'm not risking lives for this. But it would get us there in time. Cole didn't answer. Wade did. It would. If we didn't all die trying. Lena looked around at the assembled men. If we don't try, we lose everything. The ranch, the future, all of it. Kincaid will take it all, and everything we fought for will be for nothing. Eli stepped forward. I'll go. Eli, no. Cole started. I'll go. Eli repeated. This ranch saved me when I had nowhere else to turn. If there's a chance we can save it back, I'm taking it. Jack nodded. Me too. Roy sighed. Hell, I'm too old to be smart. Count me in. Silas gave his usual quiet nod. Everyone looked at Wade. He stared at the ground for a long time. Then he looked up at Cole. Your father was my best friend, he said quietly, and I promised him I'd look after this place. I failed that promise too many times. I'm not failing again. Cole's eyes glistened. Wade, I can't ask you to... You're not asking, Wade said. I'm telling you, we're doing this. Cole looked at each of them in turn, then at Lena. She took his hand. We can do this. Together. Cole closed his eyes, and Lena could see the war raging inside him. Fear versus hope, caution versus desperation. Finally, he opened his eyes. All right, he said. We ride at dawn. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She kept running the numbers in her head, calculating routes, supplies, odds. None of it added up to anything good. They needed 150 cattle, and they had 40. They needed 2 weeks, and the Southern Pass would take 12 days if everything went perfectly, which it wouldn't. She finally gave up on sleep and went to the kitchen to make coffee. Cole was already there, sitting at the table with maps spread out in front of him. Couldn't sleep either? She asked. He looked up, his face drawn with exhaustion. Every time I close my eyes, I see my father's men getting swept away by the river at the Southern Pass. Hear their screams. Lena sat down across from him. Tell me about it. Cole traced a finger along the map, following a thin line through jagged mountain terrain. The Southern Pass cuts through the Cascade Range. It's faster than the main route, but there's a reason nobody uses it in winter. The trail's narrow. One wrong step and you lose cattle over the edge. There's a river crossing halfway through that's unpredictable even in summer. And if a storm hits while you're in the pass... He didn't finish the sentence. But your father tried it, Lena said. He was desperate, just like we are. Cole's voice was bitter. He lost 8 men and 60 head of cattle. The ones who survived said they'd never seen anything like it, said the mountains were trying to kill them. But some of them made it through. Barely, Lena studied the map, tracing the route with her eyes. What about the cattle we don't have? How do we get 110 more head in less than a day? Cole leaned back in his chair. That's the other problem. The only rancher close enough who might have cattle to spare is Marcus Brennan, but he and my father had a falling out years ago. He won't help us. What was the falling out about? Water rights. My father won a legal battle that Brennan thought should have gone his way. Brennan swore he'd never do business with a Mercer again. Maybe he'll change his mind. Cole shook his head. You don't know Brennan. He's more stubborn than the land itself. Then I'll convince him. Cole looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Lena, we don't have a choice, Cole. If there's even a chance he'll help, we have to try. Cole studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but I'm coming with you. No, Lena said firmly. You need to stay here and organize the drive. Get the men ready, gather supplies, plan the route. I'll handle Brennan. Lena, he's not going to listen to you. Then I'll make him listen. Cole reached across the table and took her hand. Why are you doing this? You could walk away right now. This isn't your fight anymore. Lena squeezed his hand. Yes, it is. The moment I decided to stay, it became my fight too. Dawn came too quickly. Lena saddled her horse while the men prepared for the cattle drive. Wade was checking saddles and gear. Eli and Jack were organizing food supplies. Roy and Silas were gathering the 40 cattle they had, checking each one for fitness to travel. Cole walked Lena to her horse. Brennan's ranch is about 20 miles northeast. You should be able to make it by noon if you push hard. I'll be back before dark, Lena promised. Be careful. Brennan's got a temper. So do I when I need to. Cole pulled her into a quick, fierce kiss. Come back to me. Always, Lena said. She mounted her horse and rode out, not looking back. If she looked back, she might lose her nerve. The ride to Brennan's ranch took her through country that was both beautiful and brutal. Snow-covered plains gave way to rolling hills, then to rougher terrain dotted with pine trees and rocky outcroppings. The cold was relentless, seeping through her coat and settling in her bones. But Lena barely noticed. Her mind was focused entirely on what she'd say to Marcus Brennan, how she'd convince a man who'd nursed a grudge for years to help the son of his enemy. By the time she reached Brennan's property, it was just past noon. The ranch was impressive, larger than Cole's, with well-maintained buildings and healthy-looking cattle grazing in the distance. This was a ranch that was thriving, not just surviving. Two men met her at the gate, both armed. "State your business," one of them said. "I need to speak with Marcus Brennan. He ain't taking visitors. Tell him it's about Cole Mercer and the Southern Pass." The men exchanged glances. One of them rode off toward the main house, while the other kept his rifle trained loosely in Lena's direction. 10 minutes later, the man returned. "Boss says you got 5 minutes." They escorted her to the house. Marcus Brennan was waiting on the porch, a barrel-chested man in his 60s with iron-gray hair and eyes that could cut glass. "5 minutes," he said without preamble. "And only because you mentioned the Southern Pass. Last time someone tried that route, 8 men died. I'm curious why you're fool enough to try it." Lena dismounted and faced him directly. "Because Russell Kincaid is trying to steal the Mercer Ranch, and the only way to stop him is to deliver 150 head of cattle to Millerton in 14 days. Brennan's expression didn't change. "And what's that got to do with me? You're the only rancher within range who has cattle to spare. We need 110 head. Brennan barked out a harsh laugh. "You want me to lend cattle to a Mercer? Lady, you've got nerve. I'll give you that." "We're not asking for charity," Lena said. "We'll pay you back with interest once we get payment from the Millerton contract. If you make it to Millerton, which you won't. Maybe not, but we're going to try." Brennan studied her for a long moment. "You're not Cole Mercer. Who are you?" "My name is Lena Cross. Cole saved my life 2 years ago. I came to his ranch to repay that debt. And now you're trying to save his ranch by throwing yourself into a suicide mission through the Southern Pass in the middle of winter." Brennan shook his head. "Either you're the bravest woman I've ever met, or the dumbest." "Maybe both," Lena admitted, "but that doesn't change the fact that we need your help." "Why should I help a Mercer? His father cost me a fortune with that water rights lawsuit." Lena took a step closer. "Because this isn't about old grudges or ancient history. This is about whether good people get to keep their home, or whether men like Russell Kincaid get to take whatever they want just because they have the power to do it. The world's not fair, Miss Cross. Surely you've lived long enough to know that." "I have," Lena said. "I've lost everything I ever cared about. My family, my home, my whole life. I know exactly how unfair the world is. But I also know that sometimes, just sometimes, we get a chance to make it a little less unfair. This is one of those chances." Brennan's jaw tightened. "You're wasting your time." "Then give me 1 more minute of it," Lena said. "Cole Mercer is not his father. He's a good man trying to honor his family legacy while fighting against odds that would break most people. And he's doing it with nothing but determination and a handful of loyal men who believe in him." She paused, letting her words sink in. "You could help us. Or you could let Russell Kincaid win. But years from now, when people ask you about the Mercer Ranch, do you want to say you stood by and let it fall? Or do you want to say you gave them a fighting chance?" Brennan stared at her, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched so long that Lena thought he might just turn and walk away. Then he spoke. 110 head, you said." Hope flared in Lena's chest. "Yes. And you'll pay me back with 20% interest once you deliver to Millerton?" "Yes." Brennan turned to one of his men. "Get Davis and tell him to cut out 110 of the best cattle from the north herd. Have them ready to move within the hour." The man's eyes widened. "Boss, are you sure? Did I stutter?" "No, sir." The man hurried off. Brennan turned back to Lena. "I'm doing this because you're right. Cole's not his father. And because I'm tired of watching Russell Kincaid swallow up every decent ranch in this territory. But understand something, Miss Cross. If you fail to deliver those cattle, or if Cole can't pay me back, I will take that ranch myself. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear," Lena said. "Then get those cattle to Millerton." Brennan's expression softened just slightly. "And for what it's worth, I hope you make it." By the time Lena returned to the Mercer Ranch with 110 head of Brennan cattle, the sun was setting and the men had everything else ready to go. Cole met her at the gate, his face a mixture of relief and disbelief as he saw the herd behind her. "How did you—" "I asked nicely," Lena said, dismounting, "and I promised him 20% interest." 20%? Wade whistled. "That's steep." "It's fair," Lena said, "and it's better than losing everything." Cole pulled her aside. "We leave in 2 hours. I want to move through the night to make up time. Are you sure you want to come? You could stay here, manage things while we're gone." "I'm coming," Lena said firmly. "It's going to be dangerous." "I know. We might not make it." "I know that too." Lena took his face in her hands. "But I didn't come this far to watch you ride off without me. We do this together." Cole kissed her forehead. Together. They departed at midnight under a sky full of stars. The temperature had dropped to brutal levels, and their breath formed clouds in the frigid air. 150 head of cattle moved in a long, unwieldy line, driven by 7 people who knew the odds were against them but refused to quit. Lena rode near the middle of the herd, keeping watch for stragglers. The cattle were restless in the cold, their movements unpredictable. But the men were experienced, moving with practiced efficiency to keep the herd together. The first 2 days passed in a blur of exhaustion and cold. They pushed hard, covering 40 miles in 48 hours. The cattle were holding up better than expected, and the weather stayed clear. But everyone knew the real test was still ahead. On the 3rd day, they reached the entrance to the southern pass. Lena had never seen anything like it. The mountains rose like jagged teeth on either side, creating a narrow corridor that seemed to go on forever. The trail was barely wide enough for the cattle to move in single file, and the drop-off on one side was dizzying. Cole called a halt before they entered. The men gathered around him, their faces grim. "Once we start into the pass, there's no turning back," Cole said. "The trail's too narrow to reverse course. We either make it through or we don't. Everyone understand?" They all nodded. "If anyone wants to back out, now's the time. No judgment." No one moved. Cole's throat worked. "All right then. Let's move." They entered the pass as the sun reached its zenith, providing what little warmth it could. The going was slow and treacherous. The cattle balked at the narrow trail, and it took constant effort to keep them moving forward. Lena's heart was in her throat the entire time. Every time a cow stumbled near the edge, every time loose rocks skittered down into the abyss below, she felt her stomach drop. But they kept moving. Hours passed. The sun began to sink, and the temperature dropped even further. They couldn't stop. There was nowhere wide enough to make camp. They had to keep pushing through the darkness. Lena had never been so cold in her life. Her fingers were numb despite her gloves. Her face felt like ice. But she didn't complain. None of them did. Around midnight, disaster struck. One of the lead cattle spooked at something, a shadow, a sound, it didn't matter, and bolted. The sudden movement caused a ripple effect through the herd. Cattle started pushing and shoving, dangerously close to the edge. "Hold them!" Cole shouted. Eli and Jack rode forward, trying to calm the lead animals. Wade moved along the side, using his voice and his rope to keep the herd from scattering. Lena saw one of the cows near the back slip on loose rock. The animal's legs went out from under it, and it began sliding toward the edge. Without thinking, Lena spurred her horse forward. She grabbed her rope and swung it, catching the cow around the neck just as it was about to go over. She wrapped the rope around her saddle horn and leaned back, her horse digging in its hooves. The rope went taut. The cow's weight was staggering, pulling both Lena and her horse toward the edge. "Lena!" Cole's voice was raw with fear. Then Wade was there, adding his rope to hers. Together, they hauled the terrified animal back from the brink. When it was over, Lena's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the reins. Cole rode up beside her. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," she managed. "That was insane. That cow represents money we can't afford to lose." Cole stared at her, then shook his head in amazement. "You're something else, Lena Cross." They finally emerged from the pass 3 days later, exhausted and frozen but intact. They'd lost 4 cattle, fewer than anyone had dared hope for, but their relief was short-lived. Ahead of them lay the river crossing. Lena had heard the stories about this river, but nothing prepared her for the reality. The water was swift and dark, swollen with snowmelt from the mountains. Ice formed along the edges, and the sound of the current was like thunder. "This is where my father lost half his herd," Cole said quietly. Wade rode up beside them. "Water's running higher than I've ever seen it. If we try to cross now, we'll lose everything." "We don't have a choice," Cole said. "We've got 4 days to reach Millerton. If we wait for the water to drop, we won't make it in time." "If we cross now, we might not make it at all," Wade countered. They stared at the raging river, weighing impossible options. Then Lena spoke up. "What if we don't cross here?" Both men turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" Cole asked. "The water's highest here because it's channeled between these rock walls. But a mile upstream, the canyon widens. The current might be slower there, the crossing easier." Wade frowned. "Wait. That'll add half a day to our journey." "Better to add half a day than lose the whole herd," Lena said. Cole considered this, then nodded. "It's worth a try." They drove the cattle upstream. Lena's instinct proved correct. Where the canyon widened, the river spread out, becoming shallower and slower. It was still dangerous, but crossable. They started the crossing just before dawn. The cattle went reluctantly, balking at the cold water. But the men worked together, coaxing, pushing, pulling, until the entire herd was moving across. Lena was halfway through when her horse stumbled on the rocky riverbed. The animal went down, throwing Lena into the freezing water. The current grabbed her immediately, dragging her downstream. She fought against it, trying to find her footing, but the water was too strong and too cold. Her heavy coat was pulling her under. She heard Cole scream her name. Then strong hands grabbed her, hauling her upward. Wade had ridden into the current after her, catching her before she could be swept away. He pulled her up behind him on his horse and rode hard for the shore. When they reached land, Lena collapsed on the bank, coughing up water, shaking violently from the cold. Cole was there in seconds, stripping off his coat and wrapping it around her. "We need to get you warm. Now." "The cattle," Lena stammered through chattering teeth. "Are across," Cole said. "All of them. We made it." Relief flooded through her even as her body continued to shake. Wade appeared with dry blankets from one of the supply packs. "Get her into these. We need to keep moving. She'll freeze if we stay still." They got Lena bundled up and back on a horse. Not her own, which had run off, but Eli's mount while he drove cattle on foot. Lena wanted to protest, but she was shaking too hard to argue. The rest of that day passed in a haze. Lena was vaguely aware of the landscape changing, of the men's voices calling out to each other, of the steady rhythm of hoofbeats and cattle lowing. By nightfall, they'd covered another 15 miles. They made camp in a sheltered valley, building a fire and finally allowing themselves to rest. Lena sat close to the flames, still wrapped in every blanket they could spare. Cole sat beside her, one arm around her shoulders. "That's twice you've almost died on this drive," he said quietly. "But I didn't," Lena pointed out. "You scared the hell out of me." "I scared myself." Cole pulled her closer. "When this is over, we're never doing anything this stupid again." Lena managed a weak laugh. "Deal." Wade approached the fire, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Lena. "Thank you," she said, "for pulling me out of the river." Wade shrugged. "Couldn't let you drown. Who'd cook when we get back to the ranch?" It was the closest thing to a joke Lena had ever heard from him. She smiled despite her exhaustion. They reached Millerton on the 13th day. The town appeared on the horizon like a mirage, and Lena felt tears of relief streaming down her face. They'd actually made it. The cattle were thinner than when they'd started, and the men looked like they'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. But they were alive, and they'd delivered every single remaining head of cattle. The buyer was waiting at the stockyard, a prosperous-looking man named Harrison, who looked skeptical when he saw the haggard group approaching. "Cole Mercer?" he asked. "That's me," Cole said, dismounting. "You're late. Contract said 14 days. "Today is the 14th day," Cole said. Harrison checked his pocket watch and grunted. "By 2 hours, barely." "Barely counts," Wade said. Harrison walked among the cattle, inspecting them carefully. His frown deepened with each animal he examined. "These cattle look like they've been through hell," he said. "They have," Cole replied. "We came through the southern pass." Harrison's eyebrows shot up. "You're either the bravest man I've met or the craziest." "Maybe both," Cole said. "But we delivered. 146 head, as contracted. Contract was for 150. We lost 4 in the past, but 146 is close enough. Harrison shook his head. Contract specific, 150 or nothing. Lena felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. They'd come so far, lost so much, and now this bureaucratic technicality was going to destroy everything. But Cole didn't flinch. Then I guess we have a problem, because these are the cattle you're getting. You can accept them and pay what they're worth, or you can reject them and explain to whoever hired you why you sent back a perfectly good herd over 4 missing cows. Harrison and Cole stared at each other for a long, tense moment. Then Harrison smiled. You got sand, Mercer. I like that. He turned to his assistant. Count them out and draw up the payment. Relief made Lena's knees weak. They'd done it. Against impossible odds, they'd actually done it. The payment came to just over $7,000. Enough to pay back Brennan with interest, cover the ranch's debts, and have some left over to start rebuilding properly. As Harrison's men drove the cattle into the stockyard, Cole turned to his crew. We did it, he said simply. Eli let out a whoop. Jack and Roy embraced. Silas smiled his quiet smile. Wade walked over to Cole and extended his hand. Your father would be proud. Cole shook it, his eyes glistening. Thank you. For everything. Don't thank me yet, Wade said. We still have to ride 200 miles back home. But the journey back was nothing like the journey there. Without the cattle to slow them down, they made good time. The weather held. And most importantly, the weight of desperation that had pressed down on all of them was gone. They'd won. 10 days later, they rode back onto the Mercer Ranch. Lena had never been so happy to see anywhere in her life. The ranch looked different now, not because anything physical had changed, but because of what it represented. It was home. Not just a place, but a future. The first thing Cole did was ride to Brennan's ranch to deliver his payment with interest. He came back grinning. What did Brennan say? Lena asked. He said we were the damnedest fools he'd ever met. And then he said if we ever need help again, we should ask. He said that? Not in those exact words, but that was the gist of it. Over the next few months, they threw themselves into rebuilding the ranch properly. With money in the bank and hope in their hearts, they repaired buildings, bought new equipment, and expanded the herd. The men worked with renewed purpose. Wade became Cole's unofficial second-in-command, his bitterness replaced by something that almost looked like contentment. Eli took charge of the cattle operation. Jack and Roy handled the day-to-day maintenance. Silas, it turned out, had a gift for breeding horses, and Lena became the heart of the operation. She still cooked, but now she also managed the accounts, negotiated with buyers, and helped make decisions about the ranch's future. The men respected her not because Cole did, but because she'd earned it. Spring came, bringing green grass and new life. The cattle fattened. The ranch prospered. One evening, as the sun set over the valley, Cole found Lena in the garden she'd planted behind the house. I have something for you, he said. He held out his hand. In his palm was a simple gold ring. It's not fancy, he said, and I know we're already committed to each other, but I wanted to do this properly. Lena's eyes filled with tears. Cole Mercer, are you proposing to me in the vegetable garden? Is that a problem? No, she said, laughing and crying at the same time. It's perfect. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. They were married a month later in a ceremony attended by half the county. Thomas Wheeler gave Lena away. Marcus Brennan showed up with a wedding gift, 20 head of breeding cattle. Even Russell Kincaid sent a grudging note of congratulations, though he didn't attend. The ranch continued to grow. Within a year, they'd tripled their herd and expanded their land. Within 2 years, the Mercer Ranch was one of the most prosperous in the territory. But the real change wasn't measured in cattle or acres. It was measured in the way Cole smiled now, freely, without the shadow of grief. In the way the men laughed together over dinner. In the way the ranch felt alive again. 3 years after Lena had first ridden onto the property with nothing but a debt and a determination, she stood in the kitchen she'd claimed as her own, cooking breakfast for her family. Cole came in carrying their daughter, a fierce little thing named Sarah, who had her mother's determination and her father's stubbornness. Something smells good, Cole said, kissing Lena's cheek. Biscuits and gravy, Sarah's favorite. Their daughter reached for Lena, who took her and set her in the high chair Cole had built. Through the window, Lena could see the ranch stretching out in all directions, fences mended, buildings strong, cattle dotting the hills. She could hear the men's voices as they started the day's work, could smell coffee brewing and bread baking. This was what she'd been searching for all those years ago when she'd ridden through a blizzard to find the man who'd saved her life. Not a ranch, not a home, but a place where she belonged, a purpose worth fighting for, a family worth everything. She'd come to repay a debt. But somewhere along the way, she'd found something far more valuable. She'd found herself. Cole wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" Lena smiled, watching the sun rise over the ranch they'd saved together. "I'm thinking about how far we've come." "We've come a long way," Cole agreed. "And I'm thinking," Lena continued, turning to face him, "that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Cole kissed her, long and slow, while their daughter banged her spoon on the table demanding breakfast. Outside, the ranch was waking up. The cattle were lowing, the horses were stirring, the land was coming alive with another day. And inside the kitchen, where it had all begun, Lena Cross Mercer stood with her family and realized the truth she'd been searching for all along. She'd never come to repay a debt. She'd come home. Cole's throat worked. "All right then, let's move." They entered the pass as the sun reached its zenith, providing what little warmth it could. The going was slow and treacherous. The cattle balked at the narrow trail, and it took constant effort to keep them moving forward. Lena's heart was in her throat the entire time. Every time a cow stumbled near the edge, every time loose rocks skittered down into the abyss below, she felt her stomach drop. But they kept moving. Hours passed. The sun began to sink, and the temperature dropped even further. They couldn't stop. There was nowhere wide enough to make camp. They had to keep pushing through the darkness. Lena had never been so cold in her life. Her fingers were numb despite her gloves. Her face felt like ice, but she didn't complain. None of them did. Around midnight, disaster struck. One of the lead cattle spooked at something, a shadow, a sound, it didn't matter, and bolted. The sudden movement caused a ripple effect through the herd. Cattle started pushing and shoving dangerously close to the edge. "Hold them!" Cole shouted. Eli and Jack rode forward, trying to calm the lead animals. Wade moved along the side, using his voice and his rope to keep the herd from scattering. Lena saw one of the cows near the back slip on loose rock. The animal's legs went out from under it, and it began sliding toward the edge. Without thinking, Lena spurred her horse forward. She grabbed her rope and swung it, catching the cow around the neck just as it was about to go over. She wrapped the rope around her saddle horn and leaned back, her horse digging in its hooves. The rope went taut. The cow's weight was staggering, pulling both Lena and her horse toward the edge. "Lena!" Cole's voice was raw with fear. Then Wade was there, adding his rope to hers. Together, they hauled the terrified animal back from the brink. When it was over, Lena's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the reins. Cole rode up beside her. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," she managed. "That was insane. That cow represents money we can't afford to lose." Cole stared at her, then shook his head in amazement. "You're something else, Lena Cross." They finally emerged from the pass 3 days later, exhausted and frozen but intact. They'd lost 4 cattle, fewer than anyone had dared hope for, but their relief was short-lived. Ahead of them lay the river crossing. Lena had heard the stories about this river, but nothing prepared her for the reality. The water was swift and dark, swollen with snowmelt from the mountains. Ice formed along the edges, and the sound of the current was like thunder. "This is where my father lost half his herd," Cole said quietly. Wade rode up beside them. "Water's running higher than I've ever seen it. If we try to cross now, we'll lose everything." "We don't have a choice," Cole said. "We've got 4 days to reach Millerton. If we wait for the water to drop, we won't make it in time. If we cross now, we might not make it at all," Wade countered. They stared at the raging river, weighing impossible options. Then Lena spoke up. "What if we don't cross here?" Both men turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" Cole asked. "The water's highest here because it's channeled between these rock walls. But a mile upstream, the canyon widens. The current might be slower there, the crossing easier." Wade frowned. That'll add half a day to our journey. Better to add half a day than lose the whole herd, Lena said. Cole considered this, then nodded. It's worth a try. They drove the cattle upstream. Lena's instinct proved correct. Where the canyon widened, the river spread out, becoming shallower and slower. It was still dangerous, but crossable. They started the crossing just before dawn. The cattle went reluctantly, balking at the cold water. But the men worked together, coaxing, pushing, pulling, until the entire herd was moving across. Lena was halfway through when her horse stumbled on the rocky riverbed. The animal went down, throwing Lena into the freezing water. The current grabbed her immediately, dragging her downstream. She fought against it, trying to find her footing, but the water was too strong and too cold. Her heavy coat was pulling her under. She heard Cole scream her name. Then strong hands grabbed her, hauling her upward. Wade had ridden into the current after her, catching her before she could be swept away. He pulled her up behind him on his horse and rode hard for the shore. When they reached land, Lena collapsed on the bank, coughing up water, shaking violently from the cold. Cole was there in seconds, stripping off his coat and wrapping it around her. "We need to get you warm. Now." "The cattle," Lena stammered through chattering teeth. "Are across," Cole said. "All of them. We made it." Relief flooded through her even as her body continued to shake. Wade appeared with dry blankets from one of the supply packs. "Get her into these. We need to keep moving. She'll freeze if we stay still." They got Lena bundled up and back on a horse. Not her own, which had run off, but Eli's mount while he drove cattle on foot. Lena wanted to protest, but she was shaking too hard to argue. The rest of that day passed in a haze. Lena was vaguely aware of the landscape changing, of the men's voices calling out to each other, of the steady rhythm of hoofbeats and cattle lowing. By nightfall, they'd covered another 15 miles. They made camp in a sheltered valley, building a fire and finally allowing themselves to rest. Lena sat close to the flames, still wrapped in every blanket they could spare. Cole sat beside her, one arm around her shoulders. "That's twice you've almost died on this drive," he said quietly. "But I didn't," Lena pointed out. "You scared the hell out of me." "I scared myself." Cole pulled her closer. "When this is over, we're never doing anything this stupid again." Lena managed a weak laugh. "Deal." Wade approached the fire, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Lena. "Thank you," she said, "for pulling me out of the river." Wade shrugged. "Couldn't let you drown. Who'd cook when we get back to the ranch?" It was the closest thing to a joke Lena had ever heard from him. She smiled despite her exhaustion. They reached Millerton on the 13th day. The town appeared on the horizon like a mirage, and Lena felt tears of relief streaming down her face. They'd actually made it. The cattle were thinner than when they'd started, and the men looked like they'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. But they were alive, and they'd delivered every single remaining head of cattle. The buyer was waiting at the stockyard, a prosperous-looking man named Harrison, who looked skeptical when he saw the haggard group approaching. "Cole Mercer?" he asked. "That's me," Cole said, dismounting. "You're late. Contract said 14 days. "Today is the 14th day," Cole said. Harrison checked his pocket watch and grunted. "By 2 hours, barely." "Barely counts," Wade said. Harrison walked among the cattle, inspecting them carefully. His frown deepened with each animal he examined. "These cattle look like they've been through hell," he said. "They have," Cole replied. "We came through the southern pass." Harrison's eyebrows shot up. "You're either the bravest man I've met or the craziest." "Maybe both," Cole said, "but we delivered. 146 head as contracted. Contract was for 150. We lost 4 in the pass, but 146 is close enough." Harrison shook his head. "Contract specific, 150 or nothing." Lena felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. They'd come so far, lost so much, and now this bureaucratic technicality was going to destroy everything. But Cole didn't flinch. "Then I guess we have a problem, because these are the cattle you're getting. You can accept them and pay what they're worth, or you can reject them and explain to whoever hired you why you sent back a perfectly good herd over 4 missing cows." Harrison and Cole stared at each other for a long, tense moment. Then Harrison smiled. "You got sand, Mercer. I like that." He turned to his assistant. "Count them out and draw up the payment." Relief made Lena's knees weak. They'd done it. Against impossible odds, they'd actually done it. The payment came to just over $7,000, enough to pay back Brennan with interest, cover the ranch's debts, and have some left over to start rebuilding properly. As Harrison's men drove the cattle into the stockyard, Cole turned to his crew. "We did it," he said simply. Eli let out a whoop. Jack and Roy embraced. Silas smiled his quiet smile. Wade walked over to Cole and extended his hand. "Your father would be proud." Cole shook it, his eyes glistening. "Thank you for everything." "Don't thank me yet," Wade said. "We still have to ride 200 miles back home." But the journey back was nothing like the journey there. Without the cattle to slow them down, they made good time. The weather held. And most importantly, the weight of desperation that had pressed down on all of them was gone. They'd won. 10 days later, they rode back onto the Mercer Ranch. Lena had never been so happy to see anywhere in her life. The ranch looked different now, not because anything physical had changed, but because of what it represented. It was home. Not just a place, but a future. The first thing Cole did was ride to Brennan's ranch to deliver his payment with interest. He came back grinning. "What did Brennan say?" Lena asked. "He said we were the damnedest fools he'd ever met. And then he said if we ever need help again, we should ask." He said that? Not in those exact words, but that was the gist of it. Over the next few months, they threw themselves into rebuilding the ranch properly. With money in the bank and hope in their hearts, they repaired buildings, bought new equipment, and expanded the herd. The men worked with renewed purpose. Wade became Cole's unofficial second-in-command, his bitterness replaced by something that almost looked like contentment. Eli took charge of the cattle operation. Jack and Roy handled the day-to-day maintenance. Silas, it turned out, had a gift for breeding horses. And Lena became the heart of the operation. She still cooked, but now she also managed the accounts, negotiated with buyers, and helped make decisions about the ranch's future. The men respected her not because Cole did, but because she'd earned it. Spring came, bringing green grass and new life. The cattle fattened. The ranch prospered. One evening, as the sun set over the valley, Cole found Lena in the garden she'd planted behind the house. "I have something for you," he said. He held out his hand. In his palm was a simple gold ring. "It's not fancy," he said, "and I know we're already committed to each other, but I wanted to do this properly." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "Cole Mercer, are you proposing to me in the vegetable garden? Is that a problem?" "No," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "It's perfect." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. They were married a month later in a ceremony attended by half the county. Thomas Wheeler gave Lena away. Marcus Brennan showed up with a wedding gift, 20 head of breeding cattle. Even Russell Kincaid sent a grudging note of congratulations, though he didn't attend. The ranch continued to grow. Within a year, they'd tripled their herd and expanded their land. Within 2 years, the Mercer Ranch was one of the most prosperous in the territory. But the real change wasn't measured in cattle or acres. It was measured in the way Cole smiled now, freely, without the shadow of grief. In the way the men laughed together over dinner. In the way the ranch felt alive again. 3 years after Lena had first ridden onto the property, with nothing but a debt and a determination, she stood in the kitchen she'd claimed as her own, cooking breakfast for her family. Cole came in carrying their daughter, a fierce little thing named Sarah, who had her mother's determination and her father's stubbornness. "Something smells good," Cole said, kissing Lena's cheek. "Biscuits and gravy, Sarah's favorite." Their daughter reached for Lena, who took her and set her in the high chair Cole had built. Through the window, Lena could see the ranch stretching out in all directions. Fences mended, buildings strong, cattle dotting the hills. She could hear the men's voices as they started the day's work, could smell coffee brewing and bread baking. This was what she'd been searching for all those years ago when she'd ridden through a blizzard to find the man who'd saved her life. Not a ranch, not a home, but a place where she belonged, a purpose worth fighting for, a family worth everything. She'd come to repay a debt. But somewhere along the way, she'd found something far more valuable. She'd found herself. Cole wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" Lena smiled, watching the sun rise over the ranch they'd saved together. "I'm thinking about how far we've come." "We've come a long way," Cole agreed. And I'm thinking, Lena continued, turning to face him, that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Cole kissed her, long and slow, while their daughter banged her spoon on the table, demanding breakfast. Outside, the ranch was waking up. The cattle were lowing, the horses were stirring, the land was coming alive with another day. And inside the kitchen, where it had all begun, Lena Cross Mercer stood with her family and realized the truth she'd been searching for all along. She'd never come to repay a debt. She'd come home.